Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry, I can't see myself. Okay. So this program was supposed to be in person. We were planning on touring different communities in the Southeast area with our partnership together communities. The idea behind the Shlichim tour was to help create and maintain a strong, united community between all our small communities within our consortium area and maintain the connection between us. We saw it as another opportunity to hear about Israel from some people who are actually from Israel. We were planning on a tour between different communities for a whole 10 days using our car and have different programs for all the communities as they asked for. This COVID surge had us canceling the tour and doing it online. It's not our favorite thing to do, but health is before everything, and that's the most important thing. So thank you all for joining us. I'll start with some self-introduction, and then Noam and Stav would do as well. So hi everyone, my name is Inbal. I am about to turn 24. I was born and raised in a small community in the north part of Israel called Alona Galil. It's about 30 minutes drive from Haifa. It's a very small, strong community that only has about 200 families. I am the third kid out of 4. I have 2 older sisters and a brother who's younger than me. My oldest sister is a social worker. The other one is studying to get her teacher's certification. And my brother just graduated from high school recently and is about to join the IDF. My mom is a social worker and my dad is an engineer. He used to work for the International Water Company of Israel. Yeah, that's basically my family. My great-grandparents from my mom's side all came from Poland as pioneers. They started different kibbutzim around Israel. They all came long before the Holocaust, but their families, most of them were perished. On my dad's side, my grandma, Sarah, came from Poland when she was 3 years old, before the Holocaust, just a few years. And my grandfather, Meir, was born and raised in Israel, actually, as a 5th generation to be born in Israel, which makes me a 7th generation. I used to go to an agricultural high school. I studied biology and communications. I took part in a youth movement called Bnei Moshavim, a teen leadership program by a P2G partnership together of the region that I grew up in. After high school, I went to a year of service, which I would tell more later on. I served in the IDF for 2 years in the intelligence force. I would tell a little bit more about it in a bit. And right after I got out of the army, I came here to Chattanooga. I've been here for almost a year and a half now as a community shlicha for the Jewish Federation. Stav, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. To our friends in Richmond and other places, it's great to be here. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Tel Aviv, right in the center in a neighborhood called Lev Tel Aviv, the heart of Tel Aviv. My father was also born in Tel Aviv and studied in the same high school I did. My father, Yariv, is a CAT scan technician. And my mother, Iris, she's a human resources manager. My sister, Shachar, she is a modern dancer. She also lives in Tel Aviv, and yeah, it's a great area to grow up in. I actually studied in elementary school in Jaffa, which is still a part of Tel Aviv, but it's more of a mixed area in a democratic school. And in middle school, I studied in a school that was mainly people from the Soviet Union. So actually, I studied Russian for 3 years. So now I speak and read and write in Russian. It's not 100% fluent, but it's still fun to get this language, while probably most of the other kids, they learn Arabic. When I was 16, I did a few different Jewish programs. I did a Diller Teen Fellowship, which was like an exchange program with teens from Los Angeles. I went to a summer camp, a Jewish summer camp in Hungary, which was called Sarvash. Then I came back after that, also as a counselor. A little bit about my hobbies. I've been playing chess since I was very little, since I was 5, and it's always been a big part of my life. And I did it professionally for a few years in tournaments and international tournaments. Also, there is a card game I really like to play called Magic the Gathering, which I've also had a chance to fly to international tournaments to represent Israel. And then when I was 18, I had to kind of change everything with my life. I enlisted to the IDF. I served for 4.5 years in the intelligence unit. Some of my time I actually did intelligence, other time I was a commander. We'll talk about that later. But then now we can continue, I think, to learn a little bit about Noam.
Well, hi everyone. It's good to be here. My name is Noam. I'm a Shlichim in Nashville, Tennessee. This is my 3rd year. I'm originally was born in Beersheba, which is in the south of Israel, but all my family lives now and have lived for many years in Modi'in. Modi'in is right in the center of Israel between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And actually, the Hanukkah story happened in Modi'in, in the Modi'in area, and there's archaeology sites that you can go and learn about Hanukkah. My parents are running a toy store and a bookstore, and my sister is in the IDF. This is her 6th year. And we have a wonderful picture of Modi'in. Another fun fact, me and Modi'in are the same age, so sometimes it's hard to remember if how young Israel actually is. I grew up in Modi'in. After that, after high school, I went for a year of service in a city called Yavne. And I lived with 10 more people, and we all volunteered together from 18 years old to 19 years old. After that, I went to serve the army, and I will tell you all about it after. After the army, I got it in a summer camp and opened a dance program for kids who cannot afford to go to dance classes. So that's the picture down there. And before my shlichut, I worked with young adults. So I ran all the young adult programming in Modi'in. We have about 22,000 young adults in the city, and I'm sure it grew up right since I got here. But from there, I found my way to shlichut. And now I'm here in Nashville, and this is a little photo from Yom Ha'atzmaut with my community. So I'm very happy to be here and talk about Israel. But before that, I just want to go over the topics that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about our gap year and army service, our Jewish life, national security, Arab neighbors, our shlichut, why we came to shlichut, and the most important, I know usually we get some questions, so if you have any, you're welcome to put them in the chat, or we'll give time at the end to answer all of your questions. So thank you so much for being here. And I think, Stav, we're going to start with the first topic.
All right. So who will we put on the spotlight for the first time? Maybe let's have Noam. You just spoke a little bit. You want to speak a bit more? Can you tell us a little bit about your army service, and before that you also did a year of service? I'm not sure what that means.
Yes. So I did a year of service right after high school. Year of service from the Scouts organization. All of us volunteered in a city called Yavne. Just imagine 11, 18-year-olds living in an apartment. It was very interesting, but one of the most meaningful years of my life. And then I went to the IDF, and my job was a social worker for soldiers who got injured or ill during their service in the Army. So I had to go and visit soldiers at their home or in the hospital, making sure they have everything. And most importantly, just to show them that we are here for them. So I'm very grateful that I had to do that. I did this job and I met wonderful people on the way. I also, during my Army service, visited families who lost their loved ones during the holidays. So I went there, I gave them a gift for the holiday. And again, it's another way for the IDF to show them we're here for you, even in the hard times. So that was my Army service.
That sounds pretty tough, dealing with people with and their issues. Yeah, I think Inbal had a bit of different Army service and also a year of service. You want to talk about that?
Sure. So as I said, after I graduated from high school, I did 1 year of community service, pretty much like Noam. I volunteered at a boarding school named Bet Apple, which is an hour drive, I would say, south from Tel Aviv. It's a boarding school for children and youth at risk who were removed from home by court order. During my work there, I guided 11 ninth graders with two of my friends. We were together responsible for our kids' needs. We were their parents when needed, their friends, sister, brother, educator, all at once. Alongside with that, just like Noam, I lived in a commune with 9 other people my age. We were 5 girls and 5 guys, and it was very challenging, but also very fun at the same time, as well as working with the kids. It was extremely hard, and it totally popped the bubble I grew up in, up north with my great area and great family and great everything. And it taught me pretty much everything I know about the Israeli society. So it really changed my life. At the same time, with all how hard it was also very interesting. I learned so much and I gained so much from it. After that, I was waiting for about 6 months to get to the Army. And then I served in the IDF for 2 years. I was an instructor for combat scene training at a special unit of the intelligence force. It's really hard to explain what it means. And honestly, I had a really different Army service than most people and most stories that I guess you've heard before. I wasn't wearing uniform in my day-to-day life because it's a special unit, and according to the beliefs there, you don't have to wear the uniforms for a lot of reasons. And I had a really good time. I served with amazing people and I made a lot of friendships. I was working with some maps. I was working with education, which is really interesting. And it was really important to me to choose what would be the right things for the soldiers to talk about this week. And yeah, it was really great. Stav, do you want to tell us about your service?
Sure. So there's so many different things like you can do before the army, and I kind of wish I did them. Like you both told about your year of service. I'm kind of sorry I didn't do something like that, but I guess every teenager thinks about different things when we're 16, 17. So when I was 18, I enlisted to the army. I did have about half a year before I enlisted since I finished high school. I finished high school in July, and I only started in February. But I enlisted to the intelligence forces, like Inbal, to a unit that's dealing with geographic information. So my expertise was what we call GIS, Geographic Information System. And we were not as secret as other units. We did wear uniforms, but what we did was gathering information that was geographic. The army needs to know, right, where the terrorists lives and what is this building and where do they hide the missiles and stuff like that. So that's kind of the stuff I dealt with in the first years of my service. And then I really wanted to be a commander. So I went to a commander's course, and I was a commander for our courses, basically taught the soldiers exactly what I did, and taught them discipline. And it was really great time. It was really fun. And then when I got to 2 years and 8 months, that's the time where you usually finish. But I felt like I had more to learn and more to give as well. So I decided to stay, and I was supposed to stay and go back to the office and do more intelligence work and be a team leader. But I was offered to join and be a commander of one of the most unique places I've ever seen in the army, which was for a program called Ro'im Rachok, which is a program for soldiers on the autism spectrum, high functioning autism. And we taught them and we trained them on how to be soldiers in regular units, doing a regular intelligence job, really important work. It was not like for charity because we wanted to help them. It was because they actually could do something. So I started doing that, and I completely fell in love. So even after being a commander in one course and coming back to my unit, I came back and I stayed, and it was really the biggest part of the end of my service. I was eventually the commander of the whole program in my unit. So I was really, really fortunate to work with all of the soldiers, and also to work with a lot of therapists and occupational therapists and speech therapists to help these soldiers become the better selves and integrate to the army better. So that was a very unique experience for me. So we're going to jump to a very different subject, which is also very interesting, I think, for me, for myself, the Judaism in our own homes. So I'll start and I'll share that I grew up in Tel Aviv, which is a very secular city. And also my family was very, very secular. So we were not doing a lot of Jewish stuff. Basically just the holidays. I think until I was about 7, when my grandfather was still healthy, we did like a kiddush on Friday nights. But most of my life, I was basically Jewish just because we were living in Israel and celebrating the holidays, which has really changed since I started doing all those programs like with youth from LA and Jews in Europe. And also, of course, Shlichut has really made me the most Jewish I've ever been. What about you, Noam? How was Jewish life in your house?
So I grew up, I basically discovered my Judaism throughout my Shlichut, which I think is something very special and something that I will cherish for a very long time. In my house, it was all, when my grandpa was alive, we used to do weekly Shabbat every Friday. And since then, since he was gone, we kind of stopped. but it also shows about the generation who came to Israel. My grandparents came from Egypt, from my dad's side, and from my mom's side from Russia and Romania. And it was very important to them. But in my mom, dad, my sister, we don't keep Shabbat and we celebrate the holidays. But I really discovered my Judaism here in the US. And it's one of the most meaningful experiences I've had. And I'm very grateful for that. So yeah. And also learned a lot from kids. Like kids taught me a lot about the holidays and what Judaism means to them. So that was very special as well.
What about you, Inbal?
So I always also grew up in a very secular home. My parents came from very different backgrounds. My mom grew up at a kibbutz, and in her kibbutz, they took Judaism and put it into their perspective and their way of practicing. So obviously, everyone at the kibbutz were Jewish, but for example, the Passover Seder looked very different than I can't even imagine it myself because I've never got to be at one, but it was filled with songs and stories other than the regular way of reading the Haggadah. That's just a small example. Whether my dad grew up in a house that were a little more religious, and because his parents came from houses that were more Masorti, a little more religious, but still not keeping Shabbat or not actually religious. So I feel like before my parents got married or had kids, they kind of sat together and decided how they want to have Judaism experienced in their own home. And ever since I can remember myself, we were having family Shabbat dinners. When I was a kid, it was with my grandparents. Later on, they started to come to our house. We would see our family, we would see a friend. It would be a nicer, bigger meal than all the other days of the week, as well as celebrating the holidays, but not in a very religious way. We kind of created a lot of our own traditions. So yeah, that's my experience with that.
Because that's something that can really depend on where you're from as well. Where do you live, where your parents are from. And if you're already looking and talking about where you're from, I think this is a good time to jump to our next subject, which is the Arab society in Israel. And I think that is the most affected by where you're from. If we talk about where I'm from, Tel Aviv, it really depends. Like if you go to Jaffa, this is a lot of the Arab society, and I would say that that's basically where I mostly encountered people from the Arab society. In my elementary school, we had, because it was in Jaffa, we had Arab kids, but I never really got like very good friends. I never really been close to anyone that's Arab, which is weird because it's 25%, something like that, 25% of our society. But I think maybe Inbal, you really grew up in a different area, more around Arabs, right?
Yeah, I have. I actually grew up in a very unique area of Israel because where I'm coming from, the small community is a part of a unique program that was happening in the early 80s in Israel called Judaization of the Galilee, where the Israeli government has decided that in that area of Israel, the Arab villages, if we're not going to do anything, the Arab villages are going to spread and take over the entire area. And that's because the way of the growth of these villages by having every son of every family building a house right outside of the parents' house, sending all the girls, I say it very generally, but sending all the girls to marry with other people and go live by the husband's parents. And that way, every kid would have their kids' houses around, and they would spread around and grow bigger and bigger. So in order to stop it and create some kind of order in the area, in not a long time, the Israeli government has started smaller villages like Alon HaGalil. And at the time, it was cheaper to get a land there. So a lot of younger people got land, and like my parents who just got married, and we were able to build a house, which is not very a possibility nowadays. So that's a different subject. But that created a very unique area, whereas I grew up with 200 community families, and around us, there were a lot of like 6 or 7 different Arab villages. And when I'm saying Arab villages, I'm talking about very different types of communities. There are the Druze communities, there are Christians, Arabs, there are Muslim Arabs, there are Bedouin, there are a lot of different areas. Yes, Martha, I'm right by Shfarram. It's 4 minutes away from me. I would love to know why you're asking that. So just like Shfarram, that's one of them. And Adi, I see the question here. Adi is 10 minutes away from me. I have a lot of friends from there. We went to the same high school together. And on my way to high school, as well as to middle school and 12 years of school, I had to drive with my yellow bus every morning and back through an Arab village called Bet Zarzir. So that was just part of my life growing up. When things get more tension in security in Israel, then it gets more tension in our area. And when it's less tension, then it's less in our area, just like every other place. And we were all together as one community. Like we would go to get groceries there, especially on Shabbat, where all the Jewish clothes were closed. And then as long as I can remember myself, we had people from Bir el-Maksur, which is another village in the area, coming to work at the grocery store and coming to fix whatever we needed around the house. And they're just part of our community like every other person. And yeah, that's basically where I'm coming from.
Right, so you brought up as very our next subject, which is the tension sometimes that's in the society, and we're talking about, of course, the national security. So, Noam, how would you say national security in Israel, which is a very tough subject? How did it affect your life? How did you realize anything about it?
So I think it's something that it's important to talk about and ask if you meet Israelis, what do you think about it? Because each Israeli has their own experience. But in my case, I think it started at school. I was in 3rd grade. And they sat us down and explained to us about gas masks. And how to put them, and how they're gonna be sent to our house, and if needed, we needed to use them, which is very interesting, and it's just the life that we lived. In between, I feel like as a child, I haven't really felt it until I went to the army. And I served from 2013 to 2015. And in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, there was a war with Gaza. And we had to deal with hundreds of rockets. And every day before I went to my base or to my whatever I needed to go, I had a little prayer in my heart that no rockets will fall on me today. Please, please. Like, it just, when you talk about it in your shlichut, it's unbelievably tough, and you don't even realize that this was your life. But I did, and I went, my aunt worked in Tel Aviv and I served in Ramat Gan, and every time we went on the train, we hold hands. I'm like, please, please, let's not be us. And yeah, I think one of the reasons the Israeli people are so close and it feels like a family, it's because the army service and these experiences. Because if there is a siren, I can run anywhere and everybody will welcome me with open arms and maybe a tea to relax. Or every time I had to run, and I went to strangers' apartments because I had no choice, and everybody will open the door no matter what, because we all need to deal with it together. And we can do a whole program about it maybe next time, but everything that happened in May was a whole other story, to add the social media component to it. So that's been the toughest time in all the 3 years with COVID and everything, and the tornado. Last May was the hardest time I had to experience as a shlicha, as an Israeli citizen. It was very, very, very tough. So this is my story with that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their experiences from that. I think I can say that from my experience. So if we think a little bit about more on location, geographically location, so Noam is in the center west, on the way to Jerusalem. I live in Tel Aviv, and both Noam and me are 1.5 minutes. We have 1.5 minutes to run to shelter. So it really depends on where you are from. I think that because myself from Tel Aviv, we kind of lived in a bubble where even when something was happening, if we are talking about 2014, the Protective Edge, Operation Protective Edge, I was in high school. Sirens every day, sometimes a few times a day. People were still sitting in coffee places in Tel Aviv, eating in restaurants and continuing their lives, which was kind of it was very weird. People on one hand were very scared. This was like 54 days of operation. So in Tel Aviv, the vibe was very different, and we kind of lived in a bubble. I think this really changed when I joined the army and I started actually doing intelligence work and actually seeing what was happening, because I could see with my own eyes, well, this is a place where our enemies have weapons, and this is near a mosque and stuff like that. That really affects how you think about it. And when you start talking about it and you're all the way from Israel, exactly like Noam, last May, you have to talk about it, the feeling you have when everyone is running to shelters, and here you're all like so far away. When you don't have to run to a shelter and there is a siren, you will never understand it. I remember, I'll say the last thing and then it will be Inbal's turn, that in this New Year's, I was sitting in a house with people and there were fireworks. And the fireworks were so strong, I started doing like this because it was just too much to bear. And I remember people asked me if this is PTSD from rockets. And I'm from Tel Aviv. I've heard a few rockets in my life, but not a lot. But this is like how it's so different. It's not the same. It's not like fireworks. It's not the same. This is something that's really tough to, it's always interesting to talk about, but it's also tough to explain if you never had the same experience. And I think Inbal's experience is kind of different than other people because she's in the north, and that's a different kind of national security issues.
Yeah, and honestly, when I can stand fireworks. It's beautiful. I like seeing them, watching them, but the sound of it is, I do have the PTSD of it, because when I was, how old I was, like 8 years old, third grade, summer of 2006, it was the second war with Lebanon. And even though I'm farther away from the border, from the northern border, my area still was in a lot of risk, and we were running in and out of the shelters the entire time of the war. And it was a very hard time of my life. It was the first time I remember experiencing anything like that for the entire, I think it was about a month. It was summer vacation, we were off school, we were home most day. We weren't north enough to get cleared from the area and having people in the central or southern part of Israel hosting us. So we were home, but everything got canceled, all the summer programs. And for the entire time, I remember that during the day, we would be ready and know that if there is an alarm going off, we need to run few houses down the street to go to the bomb shelter, because at the time we didn't have our own bomb shelter at my house. I can promise you that since then we do have one. After the war, we've had to build one to get ready. And during the nighttime, people wouldn't want to really run all the way to the shelter. So for the entire time, my entire family, as I said, we are 4 kids and 2 parents. We were all sleeping together in our living room because it was safer than staying upstairs where our bedrooms are in my house. And I remember, which I think is kind of funny today, that I wasn't worried about myself. And even because most of all, I was scared for my grandparents, which was kind of funny because at the same time, lucky us, they weren't in their home, and they lived in Nahariya at the time, which got hurt really bad during that month. And even though they weren't there, they were safe visiting my mom's sister in California. It was really scary, especially driving around their house after the war was ended and everything was safe, because all around their block, every few meters probably, you could see a whole mess in a house, on the road, wherever, everywhere around you, you could see the spots where the bombs hit, and it was really hard to watch as an 80-year-old. So yeah, so since then, I'm having a hard time listening to when I don't know that a balloon is gonna pop. But I won't say it's a hard PTSD and that it's like with me every day of my life, because it is at some point, it just gets part of your life, and that's life in Israel, and where it's part of us. Stav?
Yeah, I think some people, I don't know the exact term, but like some people call the Israelis like a trauma, like people of trauma or people of PTSD, because we all share that. But I think that can bring us to the last subject. We have talked about the army and the year of service, about Judaism in a home, about the Arab society, about the national security, and now kind of what puts everything together is our shlichut, going out for shlichut. So Noam, do you want to share why did you go to shlichut?
So my cousin was a shlicha in Miami for 3 years, and she's my inspiration in everything. She was many years ago. So she was my first inspiration. I always had wanted to work with Jewish communities abroad. So that seemed like an amazing opportunity. Didn't know where Nashville was, but since then I've learned so much about Tennessee and Nashville and the South. And I'm very happy that I'm here. I mean, obviously I said for another year, but yeah, that's my journey with Shlichut.
Awesome. Inbal?
I was what I like to call a partnership together kid. When I was in 7th grade, I got chosen to go on a summer camp program with the P2G I grew up in was Central Galilee area with Detroit area in Michigan. So I spent a month-long summer camp in Michigan. It changed my life and exposed me to the fact that I didn't know that there were Jews out of Israel. And since then, throughout my entire high school experience, I was taking part in different programs of the Partnership Together, Teen Leadership Program, Teen Mission Program. I kept in touch with a lot of my camp friends and the other programs. I went to Camp Tamara Camp, Camp Mass. And then I joined the army, I did all these things, and I always knew that you can go on Shlichut, but I didn't know there was this program that we are doing, that's the community Shlichim program. I only knew about the one that you have to have a first degree in whatever you want, but you have to have a degree to go and be an Israel Fellow at the Hillel in different campuses. So when I started in the army, I didn't know what I was going to do after, and I'm the kind of person that needs to know what they're going to do, what's the next step. And I was stressing out about what I'm going to do. And as soon as accidentally I heard about this program, it was the best accident because I knew that that's what I need to do. And I got really lucky to get to Chattanooga out of all places because it's the perfect fit for me. And I loved it since the first moment. Stav?
Awesome. It's always great to hear other people shlichut stories. I would say that mine was a mix of a few things. The fact that I didn't experience anything Jewish most of my life kind of made me want to experience more. And then adding the Diller Teen Fellowship I did with Los Angeles teens and the summer camp in Sarvash, and then coming back there as a counselor. All of these experiences brought me to look for something greater that's abroad, that's outside of Israel, talking about Israel, Jewish education. And after 4.5 years in the army, I of course knew, I think even after 3.5, I knew I wanted to do something big after that, but not just a regular trip like a lot of people do. They just go to the East or to the South America. I wanted a combination. I wanted to go work. I wanted to travel at the same time. So the shlichut was perfect for me. And I'm really happy to be here. And I really wish I could have been physically in Richmond. I did go to Richmond just to eat a poke bowl on the way somewhere, but I didn't have a chance to really visit Richmond yet. But shlichut is a lot. I mean, visiting all these places, it's a big part of the shlichut. But we got to the final point of our presentation. I think this is a good time to ask if you have any questions for us. We went through all these different
Martha's question in the chat. I think you.
Yeah. Let's answer that one. And Stav, maybe in the meantime, you could put our emails.
Yes.
So we're gonna put our emails in the background. You are more than welcome to reach out to us at all times for any subject. We would love to hear from you. And Martha's question is, what is one thing that surprised each of you about your communities? And I would go ahead and start with, first, it's a really good question, and I need to think about it for a second. I think that when I got into, obviously I never heard of Chattanooga before. And the first time the person at the Jewish agency told me that I can get an interview to a community, the Jewish community in Chattanooga, my reaction was, Chatama? Ma? What?
Chatunga.
I thought she was kidding. She was laughing. I didn't thought it was real. And ever since, all I heard was how great are the people in Chattanooga and how friendly and how warm and like the Southern hospitality. And all these things. And then I was like, yeah, sure, like it can't be that, it can be that great as everyone talks about. And I think the biggest surprise was that it was way more than what people were saying. And I don't know why it surprised me so much looking back, but yeah, I think that's the one biggest thing for me. No, I'm
I'll
Stav.
say, no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. I would say in big, bold, just country music in big letters. I didn't know about country. I didn't know who Dolly Parton was. Like, oh my God, where I was in the last 25 years. But I've learned so much about the music culture in Nashville, and there's so many amazing Jewish musicians in our community, and it's one thing that I've learned so much from. So yeah, music and musicians.
I'll say before I moved to Jacksonville, I looked on the Google Maps and I saw how many small ponds, like a lot of water all around the city. And I asked Jill Abel, which some of you know probably, Jill, can we swim in those places? In Israel, every time we see water, we just swim in it. We just go inside. And they, like Jill and other people, were shocked of this question. Like, what are you talking about? So I would say this has probably surprised me, that there are a lot of water that you should not swim, especially in Florida, because of the animals. Yeah. Any other questions?
I saw a
Thank you,
question
Martha.
at the
Thank you.
beginning, one last one. Were the kids from all in our year of service, if there were from all backgrounds and religious, and if we still keep in touch with them today? That was my last one. That was the last one.
Yeah, Inbal answered it.
Oh, you did? Okay.
She answered it in chat at the beginning, yeah.
Okay.
So favorite foods here? That's a good question. I have to say, I'm sorry, America, but Israeli food is just better. So favorite food?
Mexican food. I discovered Mexican food since moving
Mexican
here.
food.
You don't really have it in Israel.
Thai food. Thai food, I would say, so good.
I think
Israel
all the
is
different cultural food that you can get here in the US, not particularly in Chattanooga. In Chattanooga, it's a little harder. I think it opened me to a lot of new types of foods. The typical American food.
Barbecue, right?
We started that the food is no, but like you have so many great, like the sushi here is like 10 times better than it could ever be in Israel.
No, that's because you don't eat sushi in Tel Aviv.
I do. It's the only place I will
So in bad places, maybe you go to Japanica to eat sushi, but Tel Aviv is the #2 city in the world with the most sushi restaurants per capita, after #3 after Tokyo and New York. Tel Aviv
I still tasted the best one here, but see, it's 3 faces, and we all have different tastes.
Like we have amazing sushi in Israel.
I think
are they good?
I'm with Martha. It's not about quantity.
It's about the quality. Yeah, good question.
But
there
yeah,
is a big scene in Tel Aviv that's all about food. I miss it.
But we want to say thank you so much for having us tonight. It was very, very special. And I hope you learned something new about Israelis and about us. We are one email away. So if you have any other questions, we would love to answer them.
And thank you, of course, first of all. If you are not too tired of Zoom, in 30 minutes, we're gonna start a really big program here in Chattanooga. We had a lot of people registered, so most likely it would be hard to log into the webinar itself, but we are gonna have it live streamed on our Facebook page. You can look it up on Facebook or through our website. It would also be recorded, so you can see it anytime later. But yeah, that's why I'm gonna say thank you very much and sign off, and I'll hope to see you soon. Good
Bye,
night.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you for
everyone.
coming.
Thank you, Sarah, for having us. Thank you.